first. So,
Okay. All right, I'll let you go ahead. Thank you.
all right. So as we're getting started, just some reminders. First, you control the ability to mute or unmute yourself through the Zoom menu. When the icon is red and has a line through it, your microphone is muted. Stay muted when not speaking, please. During a call for a vote and after each presentation, you can unmute your microphone and members can vote as a group. If needed, the chair may ask for a roll call vote where each member can respond when their name is called by the moderator or designated staff. If you have poor quality internet connection, try turning off other programs, turning off your web camera, and connecting directly to the internet rather than through Wi-Fi. And while PAG and RTA meetings are conducted virtually, we want to remind committee members that the meetings are open to the public. Committee members are obligated to comply with Arizona's open meeting law and only discuss matters on the agenda during the public meeting. Also, pursuant to the state's open meeting law, committee members shall not discuss with a quorum of the committee at any time any matter that may be presented to the committee for discussion or action. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. So I'm going to go ahead, given that it's a virtual meeting, I'm going to read the list of people who I see up here as attendees, and I'll make sure that I haven't left anyone out after. So I have Catherine Riedel, Christina McVie, David Robinson, Hannah Oden, Suno, Jeanette Duran, Jessica Rodriguez, Katie Predick, Kimberly Baeza, Mark Novak, Mead Meyer, Melanie Alvarez, Michael Catanzaro, Natalie Shep, Paul Casitano, Paul Rosenboom, Paula Bloomer, Sam Credio, I hope I'm saying that right, Sandra Mena, Daniel Chekolinsky, Howard Myers, Jennifer Flood, Robert Orozco, Crystal Spires, and Sonia Kelly, and Jeff Milburn. Have I missed anyone? All right, moving on. Item number 2, the in-kind form. Regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. PAG collects data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to apply for use as matching funds for grants and federal dollars. So if you're paid with federal dollars, please let us know now. All right. So time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PAG staff who are knowledgeable of the agenda and meeting materials. At the conclusion of this meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Time spent working on PAG and RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. All right, moving on to item number 3. So we had a procedural complication that was brought to our attention with regard to the election that we held last meeting. The bylaws require officer holders to be voting members, and thus it excludes ex officio members. We are, however, very thankful that Kim Franklin was willing to serve. And also, in addition, we now have Natalie Shep as the official representative from Plymouth County Department of Environmental Quality. So I'm now going to open the floor for nominations for chair and vice chair. So please unmute yourself.
Madam Chair or Lee, this is Christina McVie. I'd like to nominate Natalie Shep as chair.
Thank you. I have a nomination for Natalie Shep to serve as chair. Do we have a second?
You have a second from Marie Light.
Actually, Marie, you're an alternate, so, and not the official rep right now, so we need to have an official rep.
This is Kimberly Baeza from Wastewater. I second.
Thank you, Kimberly. All right, we have a motion and a second for Natalie. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, welcome, Natalie. You are now the chair. All right, now we need a vice chair, so I'm going to open the floor for nominations for vice chair. I'm not hearing anyone rush up to the podium. Is there anyone who is willing to serve as vice chair, and then maybe they can be nominated?
Just a question, Lee, since this is my first meeting attending, do you have to be from a different organization to nominate someone or not?
You need to be the official representative and not an alternate. And in your case, yeah, I think you're serving
Okay.
as an alternate today. And
Thanks.
Lee, this is Chris again. If no one's willing to serve, I would serve in a temporary capacity or whatever the committee would wish.
that's great news. Is there anyone willing to nominate Christine McVie, who appears to be willing?
I'll go ahead and nominate Christina McVie to be vice chair.
Great, thank you, Natalie. All right, we have a motion on the floor to consider Christina McVie as vice chair. Do we have a second?
Hi, this is Jessica Rodriguez, Tucson Water. Can I second motion or am I only an alternate?
You are serving as the official rep today, so you are good to go. So thank you,
Okay.
Jessica. So we
You're
have
welcome.
a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any nays? All right, welcome, team. We now have seats filled for chair and vice chair. Thank you so much. And I'm going to move to have Natalie continue leading the meeting. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Lee. So the next item on the agenda is the approval of the December 3rd EPAC meeting summary. I'd like to open the floor for a motion to approve the meeting summary.
So moved.
And a second.
This is Jessica, I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion to approve the December 3rd EPAC meeting summary is approved. All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 5. Hans Suno is the modeling manager of the Pima Association of Governments, and he's going to provide us with a presentation on the vehicle miles traveled during the pandemic. Take it away, Hansu.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of EPAC, the committee. And yeah, as you just mentioned, my name is Hans Suno, modeling manager at EPAC, and thank you for this opportunity to discuss about regional travel trend, including VMT and the other travel activities during the pandemic. And here is the items. So we are going to talk about the items listed here. First, pandemic timeline and introduction for the COVID and the COVID cases and the vaccination rate. Then mobility trend using Google's mobility report, and the VMT trend using streetlight data. Streetlight Data is the big data company providing aggregated travel data and the data analytics based on the keyword, mobile, and the GPS data. And plus, we will discuss about the telecommute trend using just the EPAC and the TRP employee survey data. So here's the pandemic timeline. And since the first COVID-19 case was reported in the United States, and it's been more than 2 years, this pandemic has been changing many things in our life, not only just wearing masks, but also transforming our just daily activities. Since the first case was reported, and then just the concern was escalated rapidly at the time, and the state governor actually ordered in the stay home and also just the public school closed in March 2020. And on the other hand, but the concern of the economy and also just the stay home orders just ended around just the May in the 2020. After then, we spent around a strange summer and with COVID also just waiting for the vaccines. Then finally, vaccine just started, and at the end of just the year 2020, then just there was expansion of the vaccination in the March and May time in 2021. Then the August 2021, the most of the public schools in the state and started 100% in-person classes. And just also just the expanding the shots and the vaccination, and also just expanding their just the age groups of vaccination. Then unfortunately, just December 2021, we had in the first Omicron variant in the reported in the United States. Then was just expanding our just the booster shots for all just the 12+ population in the state. So, and here on the right side, and you see that just the COVID-19 cases, you see that I'm just, there are some just up and downs, and but I'm just highlighting just the 2 winters, 2020, 21, and there were just 2021, there were just 22 winter. Those are 2 just the main picks, and the second one is actually just happened with Omicron variant. And on the left side, and you see the vaccination rate, and since the open to all just 16+ and in March 2021, and gradually and improved, and right now just around the 75% of the Pima County populations got vaccinated at least the 1 dose of vaccines, and among them just 43% fully vaccinated with the booster dose. So I'm going to just talk about the mobility report with some just the key in the timelines here. And first, and Google actually just has been providing and their worldwide daily Google mobility report here, comparing to their pre-COVID baseline in January, February 2020 with those specified mobility sectors, including in the retail and the recreation, and the grocery and the pharmacy, parks, train stations, and the workplaces, and the residential percent. And on this chart, you will see, and those just numbers up and down, and which is the monthly and the average, and based on the discussion at the timeline, as just our just the stay-home order and started, also just the public school closed. You see that just the first portion, just a significant just the up and downs, and which shows that the grocery shoppings dropped around to just 12-13%, and the parks actually dropped 25%, and other activities, and including just retail, recreation, and train stations, workplaces dropped around 40%. On the other hand, you see that in the residential is an increase around 15%. After just the stay-at-home order just ended, you see that just some gradual changes up and down for all the sectors. And after just hitting that and the peak period in the COVID during the winter season 2020, 2021, and started from just the sectors of the train stations and the workplaces and the parks, and dropped and then just followed by and the grocery and the retail and the recreations. After and the vaccine started, you see that just the relatively steep growth in those, and the activity pattern changed, and the more just on just the grocery and the parks and the retail and recreation. Then you see some kind of just a drop around just the summertime, and because of just vaccination and with vaccinations, there are a lot of just stressful 1.5 years is the COVID period. So there should be just many and the families trying to just get out of this kind of stressful 1.5 years is COVID period, and expecting to have just more trips around the time. Then as just the school started around just the August 2021, you see that some just a gradual increase, but toward the end of the 2021, you see that finally, and we're still in around the 7% and the residential and the increase, which is also combined together with the Omicron variant, and then in the other grocery, in the retail, the pharmacy. It shows that 2.3% and the 6% then drops compared to the baseline. And transit stations and the workplaces dropped in the 21% to 27%. For the parks, and you see that some just the plummet in around the summertime, but it got improved, but still just way low in the 50% and low in at the end of this 2021. Then here's the street light data, the VMT trend, and so first you see the blue line, the oscillated, which is the daily county VMT, and the orange color shows that in the 7-day average, and green dashed and the line shows the monthly average. So I'm going to just discuss this trend based on this monthly trend. And with those, the timelines, and so, but unfortunately, just the streetlight data just provide their generously and their trend, but they actually stopped their service, and so now we have just the data sets and until this summertime, and the end of just August 2021. So back to the trend, and before the COVID, we see around like a 25 million VMT. After just the started the COVID and the stay-home order, public school closed, we see that just the VMT plummeted around just the 60 million, which is roughly around a 40% drop. After then just the stay-at-home order ended, you see that gradually just change up and down. Then COVID period and winter season, 2020, 2021, you see some just the drops. And then just the vaccination started and a little bumped up, and then just go down after just having just a summertime. Then just as the school started, it shows that just some increase and a hint of just some high increase. And but this is all kind of just the patterns, and so far we have for VMT trend. And here's another data set I want to just highlight in using just the EPAC data and through just the travel reduction program. And the EPAC has been just serving employees for the employers with 100+ employees to mitigate the regional traffic congestion and provide more just diverse transportation options for their commutes. And here shows some data collection heat map, and around like 200 employers locations before the pandemic in just 2019, and during the pandemic 2020 and 2021. Based on the sample size, it actually shows that just the intensity overall, and coverage of the surveyed samples and locations is similar each other, but it varies by the intensity and size of samples, and also there are some new in and out just employers. And here is the telework participation. And as you see that in the work from home rate was changed significantly by COVID-19. And the first year in the work from home, and see here around like just 1,800 employees out of a total just 50,000 samples and reported in the telework. And in 2020, which is roughly around 8,400 employees out of 43,000 samples. In 2021, we see and more than just the 12,000 employees out of 50,000 employee samples. And on the right side, you see there's just a pattern in percentage, the share. And in 19, it shows that the 4%, and the 2020 shows that huge increase up to 19%, especially for those in the full participation, full day, and full 5-day, and telework, and increased up to 12%, and as well as the at least the 1 day, which includes 1 to 4 day, and the telework participation increased to 7%. And in 2021, and the 13%, just the 1% increase the full in the telework participation. And then the 1 to 4 day in the participation increase around just 5%. So total just 25% in the 2021. For those who participate in telework, and 2019 shows that roughly weekly and 2.6 days a week they stayed at home, and 4.2 days was and participated work from home in 2020. Then it was actually slightly dropped in the 3.9 days a week and participate in 2021. So here's another data set, and to just to show that travel impact, especially for the TRP employees during this pandemic. And see that just the first in the distance miles, in a distance and the travel time speeds, there is no just a significant impact. And first in the see that just the distance 2019, 2020 home to work is not significant changes, and as well as just work to home. And travel time is at 21 minutes, and the average in 2019 and 2020. And but in 2020 walk to home little just be improved and by the impact of COVID-19, but it's still just a marginal. The speeds are just the same, and not significant, just the difference between 19 and 2020 home to work, and as well as just the work to home. So key takeaways, and trip activities in the VMT were affected temporarily by COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the relevant state and local orders in the guidelines. So based on the Google and the mobility report, activity locations are still affected by COVID-19, but it actually varies by the activity group. And based on the streetlight data and the analysis, VMT dropped more than 40% the first spring season in 2020. After then, just it was recovered, but we still see around like a 20 million VMT at the end of the August 2020. So which is roughly around and up and down, and more or less in the 20%, which is less 20% less than the January, February 2020 baseline. And work from home rates of TRP employees and has increased significantly, the 4% in the participation in 19 pre-COVID period. After then, just we see a 19%, 25%, and a huge increase of the telework participation. Also, just there was no just a huge impact in the COVID-19, especially for the TRP and employers in the commute time, so which is quite marginal. Okay, thank you. And this is all I prepared here today. And if you have any question, I'm happy to answer that.
Thank you so much, Hansu. That's really great information. It's great to see that there's still a significant decrease in VMT. Definitely a silver lining of COVID. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask?
This is Chris. I'm just curious, will you be tracking this going forward as we hopefully come out of the pandemic phase? I'd like to see whether or not the at-home workforce remains steady or how that works out.
Yes, and we are the survey, TRP survey, and especially for telework, and is the annual, and the actual is the continuous the whole year, and but mainly for those and 100 plus the employers with 100 plus employees, so which is roughly around like a 1/3 of our just the total employees, the region wide. So we collect and annually. So if I have any chance, just I can just discuss about further and the down the road and the trend line.
Any other questions?
Yes, this is Mark Novak. I wonder if you have any observations about why there wasn't a greater reduction in commute times with the reduction in traffic that happened over COVID.
So, and one of the outputs discussed here, and we compared the 2019 and travel time based on just the travel, the survey in the TRP through just TRP in the program. It doesn't show the significant impact, and not much just saved and by that and the COVID itself. And but we hope to just have another just a year data set 2021, and that would be another just the point in how much actually saved as it just get moving toward that endemic period.
Kimberly?
Good morning.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
yeah. This is Fatima. Quick question. Is the data publicly available?
The data sets and for TRP survey, it's not. And but those are the analysis, and I think just that's actually doable. But I will just double check and with the upper management team if you are interested.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kimberly?
Yes, I was wondering if PAG expects to disseminate this information to those large employers, excuse me, to encourage more work from home policies. And wondering too whether you have an explanation for the reduction in work from home. Do you know if it's strictly like related to COVID numbers?
Actually, this is not, but the TRP and travel reduction program itself is trying to just mitigate the traffic congestion, and also just providing the service, the shared ride, such things. So the PAC and runs the program and for those matter, and also this is a kind of just the survey annually conducted. So, but should be just used for just promoting that kind of just the travel reduction, the purpose.
We've also shared this presentation with the TRP task force, and so we'll likely be sharing any updates with both this group as well as the TRP task force, and keep that information flowing as much as we can.
Great. Roxanne?
Hi. Going with sharing the information and whatnot, do we just need to send an email to you, Hansun, or if we want to have a copy of the presentation?
These presentations, and I think just it's available through just YouTube, and as well as just share, we'll share that and post on the PAC website, so you can just take these slides from there.
Okay.
Roxanne, we do post these presentations, so once we get the meeting summary together, it will be available on our website.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Hansu, for that really informative presentation. I think we're going to move on now to the next agenda item.
Thank you.
Sam Credio is the Deputy Director of the Tucson Department of Transportation and Mobility, and he is going to provide us with a presentation on the City of Tucson's electric vehicle readiness roadmap. That's Sam.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm actually going to be co-presenting with Fatima Luna with the mayor's office, and she's going to kick things off for us, and then I'll finish up the presentation. So Fatima, you want to go ahead and kick things off?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Yeah, and thanks for the invitation. So Sam and I will share an update on the progress we have made so far on the EV readiness roadmap and the plans that we have to continue its implementation this year. I believe I have talked to this group about the EV readiness roadmap in the past, but yeah, so this would be an update from the whatever presentation I made last. Next slide, please. Okay, so just as a reminder, so this EV readiness roadmap is an important piece of the puzzle to advance climate action within the city of Tucson. And you well know that the transportation contributes significantly to heat trapping gases. And in Pima County, it accounts for about 1/3 of the total emissions. So this roadmap was designed to accelerate the adoption of EVs, helping the city advance its carbon neutrality goal while providing air quality and some other economic benefits. And also the roadmap puts us in a prime position to pursue federal infrastructure funding. Next slide. So in April of last year, the mayor and council adopted a draft of the EV readiness roadmap. And since then, the city convened a working group with different departments that play key roles in its implementation. And we collectively revised the roadmap. And then early this year, mayor and council approved the final document. And again, one of the main ideas is to essentially be ready to pursue federal funding. Next slide. So I know that you've probably seen this before. I don't know if in this group, but maybe if you join the mayor and council meeting. But just as a quick reminder, the roadmap outlines a series of actions to increase the or accelerate EV adoption for city operations, but also community-wide. And these actions have progressive implementation timelines from 6 months to 10 years. And we have made significant progress since the draft was first adopted like 10 months ago. And Sam is going to share the progress that we have made. As you can see through the little fast moving, we made progress. Sam?
Thanks, Fatima. So yeah, I want to cover just some of those actions we completed since that draft document was adopted back in April of last year. We're really looking at 4 categories: outreach and education, leading by example, policies, and incentives. Now, starting out with outreach and education, we partner with TEP, and we've been partnering with them on identifying several collaboration opportunities, and that includes adopting TEP's recently developed charging demand analysis. We've also developed an EV readiness website together with some really talented folks in our GIS group and the mayor's office. When you get a chance, please visit the city's Climate Action Hub and explore the EV page. I believe that we'll drop that website link into the chat either during this presentation or afterwards. A lot of great information there. The city of Tucson is really leading by example. We're one of the first public transit companies in Arizona to launch a fully electric bus on a fixed route service. We currently have 5 battery electric buses that are currently in service. We have another 5 on order, and we've applied for an FTA grant to receive an additional 5. We expect to hear back later this spring on that grant award. If we're selected for that, that'll bring our total number of battery electric buses to 15. Really excited that our Environmental and General Services Department, which operates our fleet services, has ordered its first Ford F-150 Lightning, which if anybody's been following the news on EV vehicles, it's a really important EV for us. And so we're really excited to see that implemented in our fleet. Speaking of that, we are also working on the first draft of the city's vehicle fleet transition plan, and I'll circle back to that here in just a second. And then lastly, we are working on an RFP to increase the city's EV charging stations. As you can see, when this presentation was given back in January, we were actually expecting for those RFP submittals to come in. And so we're working on finalizing that right now. And, in terms of policy, the city's making headway in EV related policies and procedures. Mayor and council did approve an amendment to the International Residential Code to require electric vehicles charging outlets in all new 1 and 2 family dwellings. And since that ordinance went into effect, there's about 15 new single family homes that have been approved and another 30 or so that are in the queue for review. Following that, mayor and council directed staff to develop a similar amendment for multifamily and commercial new developments. Our planning and development services department is working with a group of stakeholders. In fact, we just got an update that the planning commission recommended that move forward. And we expect a public hearing in front of mayor and council either in the April or May timeframe. Additionally, we're also working with private partners, TEP and Hotel Congress, to designate meter and parking spaces as EV parking only. We plan to take some of the lessons learned from these projects to create a policy to allow EV parking in the right of way, and more specifically, even EV charging. Also want to point out that our mayor, Romero, participated in the launch of Local First Charge Ahead Challenge, an initiative to encourage the increase of EV chargers at business hubs, supporting and recognizing businesses that contribute to the enhancement of the EV charging network is a key part of the roadmap. And now looking ahead to 2022, while we've accomplished a lot, we still have some work to do. And so this year we'll continue our existing partnerships as well as seek new ones, such as partnering with dealerships on how we can encourage the adoption of EVs. We'll also finalize the vehicle fleet transition plan that I mentioned previously, and we're looking at replacing our aging city light duty vehicles with electric vehicle alternatives. As I mentioned, we are going to be adding additional charging stations, working with Park Tucson, our parking division, on installing about 22 additional charging stations throughout the city. And we also are looking to continue to apply for the no-low emission grants to bring on more battery electric buses into our fleet, but also just being ready to pursue that federal infrastructure funding that Fatima talked about previously. Again, I mentioned those code amendments that for EV-ready multifamily and commercial new developments. We expected those to be completed this year and adopted by mayor and council. And just continuing to work with the mayor's office and the EV working group, we look to develop policy to not only justify non-EV purchases for city fleet, but also allow EV charging in the right of way. And finally, we will work with TEP and other potential partners to develop a recognition program for those local businesses that are encouraging workplace charging and really taking the lead on this EV effort. And so with that, Fatima and I welcome any questions that you might have for us about this topic, and I thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much to you both. That's a fantastic plan. I can say PDEQ supports this in our efforts to try to reduce air pollution in the region, and we would love to be able to partner with you on any outreach and education efforts you may have. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I guess thank you for the presentation, and especially that moving bus graphic. That was great. Loved it. Just can you say a little bit about how many, what's the scale of the piloting? Is it just those spots mentioned there, or were there already some up and running? Just wasn't clear on, was it just, you mentioned, I think, 2 spots on Broadway, 2 metered spots on Broadway. And so I'm just trying to get a sense if that's all, or if there are some others that were already going.
You want to take it, or you want me to?
Why don't you start it off and I'll chime in.
Yes. So if you visit, and I try to put it in, but I'm sorry, I can't, I don't see the chat in here, but if you visit the Climate Hub website and specifically the EV site within that, we are already using or showing a map of the existing charging stations in the region and in Tucson. The ones that we refer to, those were fairly new, and so the ones at TEP headquarters, of course, the city partnered with them to ensure that right away charging stations was allowed, as well as the one of in Hotel Congress. So to my knowledge, those two projects were the first ones of their kind, where you had like the private sector and also the city government as come together and look at the different incentives that are locally, but also well, any incentives, and do these charging stations. So we're gonna take those the lessons learned to streamline a process to allow that to happen more. And there's already interest from other businesses to replicate that model. Chapman Automotive, it's also, they play a key role in the Charge Ahead Challenge, the Local First Lounge, essentially filling in that gap for funding from the incentives that are existing, so that businesses can, you know, Hotel Congress in particular, install those charging stations and at free of cost, basically. So those were the first efforts, I would say, but more of that is to come, and there's a lot of excitement, like, as I mentioned, not only from the city side, but also private partners. So we're excited to replicate that. And just to, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Fatima, I just wanted to add too that we also have chargers in several of our parking garages. And as I mentioned in the presentation, we're looking at adding 22 additional EV chargers. The reason why Park Tucson's involved in that is because we're looking at expanding the availability of EV chargers in the city-owned parking garages. But specifically having EV chargers in the right-of-way, like along on-street parking in downtown, there's not very many of those. And so that's what we're looking to try to replicate with some of these pilot projects that we're working on.
What are the incentives? Oh, excuse me. What are the incentives for city employees?
So right now we're also working on that. Part of the next steps is to develop, and Sam touched on that, some sort of like green fleet policy to one, really provide a format for city departments to justify purchasing non-EV vehicles, but also, you know, potentially look at, you know, incentives for city employees. We are learning from some of the green fleet policies that have been implemented in Arizona. And we're taking notes. They do have some pretty cool things for city employees. So we're in the process of looking at that and potentially replicating some of those processes for the city of Tucson. Is there anything that you want to add to that, Sam?
Yeah, I just want to mention too that we're actively seeking out some partnerships with dealerships on how we can incentivize EV adoption for city employees. For example, maybe participate in some sort of group pricing or discount program. I mean, that's one piece of it, is just being able to actually purchase an EV, and then how would we incentivize city employees to actually utilize their EVs to commute to work, whether that's, you know, reduced costs for charging, the availability of charging stations, what have you. So those two things are going to work in tandem to what Fatima said. Mead, I see you have your hand up. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Sam and Fatima, for the presentation. It's really interesting to hear the policies that developed as a result. And there was a lot of information. So if you already shared this, maybe just reiterate. But I was interested in what sort of the cumulative impact on air quality or carbon reduction goals are out of all these efforts.
Yes.
Or if it's in a plan to assess that.
Thank you, Mead. That's a good question because the EV readiness roadmap essentially is part of the larger overarching climate action plan. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the next section, the next item. But we do have this goal of being carbon neutral by 2030. And that's essentially our overarching goal. And we do intend to track our progress when it comes to like reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, that in itself would benefit air quality. So we are, part of that process is to do monitor and track our improvements. But yeah, just to answer your question, overarching, our goal is carbon neutrality.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mead. David, I see you have yet another question.
Yeah, just one quick one. I was wondering if there's been any interest that you know of from Uber or Lyft in terms of kind of incentives to their drivers, you know, in any way, and whether, yeah, there's any partnering with municipalities or states.
I have not, Fatima. I don't know if we've even talked about that. That's an interesting thought, though. But I don't know, Fatima, do you have any insight there?
Yeah, that's part of the EV readiness roadmap to work with Uber and other companies that provide that kind of service to identify potential collaboration strategies. And it's part of the plan. And yes, we intend to explore that. But I haven't reached out to them just yet. But that's part of the plan, and we do intend to pursue that and see what comes out of that. Amazon as well, I know that they have committed to, or that have pledged to electrify some of their fleet as well. So those are all potential, and as you know, we do have Amazon here in Tucson. So those are all a lot of opportunities for collaboration, I would say.
Yeah, that's great. And when you said that, that also reminded me there are now all these sort of delivery services. And so there are a lot of potential partners. That's great. I'm glad it's on the roadmap. Thanks.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you so much for that information. We will look forward to seeing more charging stations in the future.
Thank you.
So I think we're going to move on. Thank you so much for your presentations, you both. To item number 7, jurisdictional resiliency planning efforts. And this aligns with the environmental priorities that were outlined for 2022. I think it probably makes the most sense to go a little bit out of order and start with the city of Tucson, and you all can continue. Fatima, if you'd like to do your presentation regarding your climate resiliency efforts.
Yes, that sounds good. And then do I have control of and if not, I can just say next. Okay, hold on one second. Yeah, I don't think I have control over the slide, but it's okay. All right, so yes, again, thank you for the invitation. So one of the biggest updates for the city of Tucson is that we now have a consulting firm that would help us develop our climate action plan. So I would share more about them in just a second, but first I wanted to take a moment to emphasize that the city and mayor and council have not, been waiting on the plan to begin implementing some climate action. Next slide, please. Okay, So these, and I'm not gonna go into detail, but this timeline provides a high level overview of some of the actions taken so far, beginning with, just recognizing the importance of developing a climate action plan in the mayor and council retreat in 2019. And then, of course, right away when Mayor Romero became mayor, she joined Climate Mayors, and then she hired me to support the city's climate efforts. Also in February, the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Fee and Fund were created through an ordinance, and it was recently rebranded to Storm to Shade. In April, the mayor launched the Tucson Million Trees Initiative, and today close to 400,000 trees have been planted or distributed, and the mayor has been hard at work to fundraise private dollars in collaboration with partners. We have raised over $500,000. So as you know, in September, Mayor and Council declared a climate emergency and committed to not only reach carbon neutrality by 2030, but also developing the climate action plan and centering the voices of frontline communities. So in the summer, also a mayor and council allocated funding for this climate action plan consultant. And it is important to say that we didn't wait on having a climate action consultant on board to begin the community engagement process. So last year we conducted a climate community survey that reached out to close to 4,000 community members who essentially provided over 24 hours of community or public input. Next slide, please. So we also conducted 14 climate listening sessions that reached out to over 150 community members and collected over 1,300 unique community climate concerns or recommendations. And then in April, as Jen just mentioned, we adopted, or Mayor and Council adopted the EV Readiness Roadmap that we just learned about. And then in the summer, the city embarked in a zero waste path, renaming the Los Reales landfill to the Los Reales Sustainability Campus. And next week, the Environmental and General Service Department will provide an update to Mayor and Council on these items, so stay tuned for more. So after a nationwide search, the city hired Borough Hapo to develop the climate action plan, which is expected to be completed by the end of this year, and it will be part of Plan Tucson. Next slide. So who is Borough Hapo? So Borough Hapo is a consulting firm that works with a local government and NGOs across the nation, and these are some of the examples where in the places where they have work. Next slide. But they have worked with like New York City, Los Angeles to develop their climate action plans or climate related documents. And they have also authored or co-authored multiple guides and best practices manuals for C40 cities and the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. So they have national but also international experience. Next slide. So Borough Hapo would be using the equity forward approach throughout the planning process, and this approach uses a targeted universalism framework where there are universal goals and like carbon neutrality. And so these strategies that come out are targeted to equitably distribute the benefits and burdens, basically addressing like historical inequities and barriers. Next slide. So they are using the Urban Sustainability Directors Network definition for equity. And this includes 4 types of equity in their planning and policymaking processes, including procedural equity, which is thinking about inclusive engagement and representation, reducing the barriers for participation and meeting people where they are, through diverse engagement mechanisms, including like workshops, community dialogues or listening sessions, pop-up events, working with trusted community members, and having the events being conducted in the language of those community folks that we're trying to engage. Also, distributional equity is or refers to or thinking about like those benefits and burdens and how they're like distributed across that community and all sectors really within a community. And structural equity is recognizing that there are systems and structures in place that contribute to historic and present inequities, and also striving and how do we strive to address them throughout the planning process and it's the final document. And transgenerational equity is just thinking about like our current impacts for future generations and how we can best plan to reduce that impact, those impacts of climate change for those future generations. Next slide. Actually, I'm going to skip this one because I already talked about like the community engagement approach and meeting people where they are. So just to provide an overview of the team at Rural HAPL. So they would be working with Living Streets Alliance as the community engagement partner, as well as with local promotoras and other community groups to develop and implement the engagement strategy. They're also working with AutoCase, which is an economic consulting firm that will provide or that will conduct the benefit cost assessment and multi-criteria analysis to identify the best path for the strategies that will come out of these plans to reach carbon neutrality by 2030. And they're also working with the Drachman Institute at the U of A and the College of Architecture, Planning and Landscape Architecture. And they're going to provide some of that local climate knowledge and focus on green infrastructure and just provide that local expertise. And of course, the city. Next slide. Okay, so just to talk a little bit about the scope of work. It consists of 9 main areas. So the first one is, and this is already happening, Rural HAPL is engaging with the different city departments to learn about like the existing efforts so that, that informs a conditions assessment and gap analysis. So what is the work that has been done already, what's missing, and how can we move forward? They're going to be also developing a marketing and communication strategies to best communicate the climate actions that would be happening and has happened. Of course, community engagement, which we expect to be a pretty large component of the planning process. And next slide. They're also going to be creating a risk and vulnerability assessment to identify the climate hazards that are specific to Tucson through 2030, but also beyond, and specifically focusing on those most vulnerable to these climate hazards over time. They will analyze the city's greenhouse gas emissions and develop scenarios for business as usual, essentially forecasting emissions if the city doesn't take any further action, but also scenarios mapping the potential impacts of strategies, mitigation strategies by sector to achieve carbon neutrality. And using this analysis and the input collected from the engagement strategies, they would develop the mitigation and adaptation strategies for the city to take to reach carbon neutrality. Next slide. And of course, they'll create an implementation plan using the cost benefit and multi-criteria analysis to identify what is the most cost-effective but also impactful strategies that the city can take to reach carbon neutrality while focusing on those most vulnerable to climate change. So they will develop like monitoring, evaluation, and reporting a strategy and a plan. So, and this is just to ensure that we have not only a way to show progress to the larger community, but also internally to adjust if something is not working. I mean, there's no way to improve your strategy if you're not tracking it and you're not seeing what's working and what's not. So it's also some sort of like internal accountability tool to ensure that progress is being made. And then, of course, we'll have a final plan. Next slide. So the project timeline is very ambitious. So the half of a project, the first half of the project will focus on like just preparing, learning, and conducting the analysis. And the second half would be focused on creating those strategies and developing the plan. It is important to note that a key part of this entire process is engaging the public and the community throughout the process and at multiple key points in the process, so that the end result is takes into account, yes, the very scientific part of the analysis, but also like the community concerns and needs and strategies and priorities moving forward. And that's pretty much it. Do you have any questions?
David?
Thank you for such a clear presentation and the plan. It's very exciting to see. I'll start off with one question, and then if other people have questions, great. And then if, I have an unrelated one afterwards. My question is about community engagement. I'm wondering how one can find out really granular detail about how the community engagement is being done. In my experience from a lot of affordable housing and anti-displacement work, our community groups had to teach the city how to do effective engagement, and everything from having food at meetings to providing childcare to sometimes helping with transportation. And now we've got the added factor of having COVID backup plans. So I'm just wondering, early on, how individuals and groups can sort of weigh in on and maybe offer assistance with community engagement.
Yeah, thank you so much. So right now the team is hard at work creating that community engagement implementation strategy. We are certainly learning from the gaps between the survey and the climate listening sessions. It was certainly an improvement from the survey to the climate listening sessions, where we provided essentially the entire listening session workshop and agenda was developed with community members from the Tucson Climate Coalition through a consensus format. So the development of that agenda and that workshop took the largest part of the actual process. And we certainly have a lot of takeaways from that. We realized that with the survey, we were only able to reach a certain group of the population, even though it was statistically significant. It only represent a certain group of the population. That climate listening sessions did way better because it was kind of like one-on-one and really listening and taking in. And really, when we were developing that workshop, I was probably the only city employee in those meetings. And in many occasions, I just took a step back and just listened. And in the development of the workshop, right? So that's like learning from the folks that are on the ground. So then we learned that even those workshops, we still need to engage the Spanish-speaking community more, and Indigenous communities, and the business sector as well. Within the Indigenous communities, we learned that the way that we speak about climate change with this very Eurocentric perspective, it doesn't often, it doesn't make that, it's not relatable to Indigenous communities. So how can we decolonize some of those workshops and talks and really learn and improve. So we are learning. It's not perfect, and it was not perfect, but we are learning. And so these community engagement strategy that the team is developing is intended to take those lessons learned and make it better. So we're in that process right now, and we welcome suggestions because we recognize that a lot of times the folks that are on the ground have specific and unique insights that we have blind spots essentially.
I had a question. Are you planning on using PAG's greenhouse gas emissions inventory that they completed last year as a baseline?
Yeah, so that's one of the first tasks that the consultant is embarking on. So they're reviewing the greenhouse gas inventory that PAC created. They're also reviewing the greenhouse gas inventory that Tucson Water put together. Also, the Mayor's Climate Advisory Council essentially work with a group of students from ASU to look at best practices for greenhouse gas inventories, looking at cities that have are similar to Tucson and looking at what are the best practices, what is the best greenhouse gas inventory out there, what are the indicators or the data that needs to be taken into account, what do we count as scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. And they provided a nice report that the consultant is also reviewing. So taking all of this information, that consultant will make an assessment as to whether or not the greenhouse gas inventory needs to be redo or incorporate other data sources or other indicators, and and do, of course, the scenario planning based on that.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Yeah, on a different topic, just wondering if the plan already includes focus on biodiversity as an important component of fighting climate change, and again, like how groups can get involved in that way. I just moved from the Bay Area, and San Francisco is still, they've been working on their climate action plan, and there was a group of organizations, of which Golden Gate Audubon that I was part of, and we really were able to give a lot of input that was for integrating concern about biodiversity into aspects of the plan that originally the planners had not, thought it applied to.
Yes, that's going to be a big component, and welcome from the Bay Area. I actually went to school in Berkeley, so I moved here in the summer. So I hope you didn't do that move in the summer, because I was also 4 months pregnant. Anyways, yes, biodiversity is going to be a big part of it. Actually, also the Mayor's Climate Advisory Council, which it has a group of folks with a wealth of expertise in different areas. They in working with a fellow from UC3, who's also part of the advisory council, are working on a framework for the risk and vulnerability assessment, and also some recommendations, resources for the consultant to look at the different aspects that we need to look at. And biodiversity is front and center. I mean, we live in a beautiful desert landscape with really biodiverse, and the city has taken a lot of pride in being a good, not only water steward, but also in terms of pristine landscape and biodiversity. That's we do take a lot of pride on that, and yes, that's going to be a big part of the plan. And that's actually that's where the University of Arizona comes into play, and they'll provide their local expertise on that.
Thanks very much, Fatima. And we'll have to do Bay Area geography privately.
Yes.
I think we have time for one more question, Christina.
Well, the first thing I want to do is thank you, Fatima. That was fabulous. That's so exciting. It's really hopeful. And I just really wanted to ask regarding carbon sequestration. This is something that I don't think is widely understood or necessarily a well-known fact, but as our cacti and various plants in the Sonoran Desert decay, they sequester carbon. In particular, saguaros. There's been a very interesting study done out of ASU, which I could forward to you if you're interested. It might be something that your consultants aren't familiar with because it's really saguaro-centric, but it might be also useful in terms of assessing your balance. And I just want to second what David said regarding ways that the nonprofit sector could in any way contribute to the process. Really like to be very involved in that. It's very exciting. Thank you so much for your work. And the mayor, please give her my regards.
I will. Thank you so much. And yeah, please do send me that study from ASU on carbon sequestration and saguaros. We are in the process of handing out all of these important resources to the consultant for their review. So I'll appreciate that. And I failed to add my email in that slide, so I am so sorry. But yes, my email is fatima.luna@tucsonhc.gov. And if the nonprofit sector, some specific groups are able and willing to participate in providing input in that process, please email me, because that's going to be essential to have a people-centered, Tucson-centric climate action plan that is actionable, and it's also, that the community takes ownership of it.
Thank you so much for all that information. That was fantastic. We learned a lot.
Thank you.
All right, we do have several other member jurisdictions that we need to get through with their updates. So we are now going to move on to Pima County. And Sandra Mena, the Sustainability Program Coordinator at the Office of Sustainability and Conservation, is going to give an update on Pima County's efforts on climate resiliency. Go ahead, Sandra.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I am going to have a very brief update. There is quite a bit that's been going on at the sustainability programs within the Office of Sustainability in Pima County. I've been the climate scientist in the program, and I'm currently the last woman standing at this point. We had, unfortunately, a lot of you might know Julie Robinson. She left us at the beginning of this year, but to go to some exciting endeavors with the Friends of Tucson organization. So right now, there's a lot of transitioning going on and a lot of reprioritizing happening. But I think it's a really awesome time to be able to just dive a little bit deeper into our organizational sustainability action plan. So it is SAPCO, if you're not familiar with it, the Sustainability Action Plan of Pima County Operations, and it is internally focus. So one of the things that we're hoping to do is to kind of revamp it a little bit to let people know that, yes, we're an organization and entity that does want to show that we are being responsible as well moving forward. So our action plan, SAPCO, it's a plan that we started in 2018 and it goes out to 2025. And every year we come up and report out kind of the progress that we've been making towards all the goals that we've set. And we have a number of climate adaptation goals that deals with our carbon reduction, reducing our water use, reducing our waste, making sure we try to promote the purchasing of green products. But we also have a lot of climate adaptation strategies as well. And I might have misspoken. The mitigation was for the carbon reduction. Then we have the adaptation with regards to just maintaining and managing and monitoring our landscapes in addition to planting trees. So we have all of that in the plan. And we had our most recent annual report come out for fiscal year 2020 and 2021. It showed that we are making some progress, but definitely not enough if we're going to make it and reach all of our 2025 goals. So what we're wanting and trying to do right now and making great effort in is making our implementation a lot more, taking that a lot more seriously and trying to, I guess, create and find some more best practices for actually getting to our goals. So one of the exciting things that we're hoping to add to the SAPCO plan is the addition and incorporating employee commuting miles and using PAG's TRP survey in the report. So that's something that we're hoping to incorporate to actually start monitoring how employee commuting miles impacts our carbon footprint, in addition to several other additions to the plan. So we are looking at that. We actually just completed an implementation audit. So what we did was we sent out a survey to all our departments and asked them to let us know and report on all the implementation strategies that they're doing within their department. So in SAPCO itself, we have recommended strategies that were spelled out back in 2018. And so we just wanted to know, just take a temperature check and see what different departments are doing, in addition to any other actions that they're doing that might not be captured in our annual reports. So we're going to dive into that, and I'll be analyzing that. And the results of that will help us to actually create and develop an overarching comprehensive multi-year implementation plan, which has been much needed. And that comprehensive plan will then actually be able to help inform individual department plans. But all in all, it's an exciting time to be able to kind of bring more and include more of our departments into the conversation of sustainability and what they're doing, and hopefully be able to share on a more public facing forum, and to let people know that yes, we're doing what we can, and walking side by side with everyone else's efforts, especially the city, which is really, really exciting. So that's SAPCO. We're internally facing, focusing on how we can do better on our operations, but we do also have so many other efforts going on with every department. But we did want to highlight the health department right now with what they are doing. With the health department, they actually just got awarded a 5-year, $200,000 grant. And it's a part of the CDC's framework that they have called BRACE. So what BRACE is meant to do, the building resilience against climate effects, they want to help support health officials to actually come up with programs and strategies to help prepare for the effects of climate change. So what the health department is planning to do with that, at least for right now, their focus currently is to establish cooling centers around Tucson. So that's kind of their first leg, their first year of this plan. So we'll definitely keep you up to date about that. The health department is also through request to the EPA, looking with the different schools around the area where they can retrofit the HVAC system, so you can have cleaner air for the neighborhood refuges in the in the community. So again, the health department just is one example. We have a lot of different efforts going on across the county, but we're definitely excited to give you a bigger update next time. And also we will be having a new position opening up soon in the program, sustainability program. So look forward to that. And if you know anyone who's interested, just let them know. And that's all I have right now. If there are any questions, that would be great.
Sandra, we probably have time for one question. Anybody? Okay, well then we will, thank you so much, Sandra.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and move on to the town of Marana. And I believe we have Paula Bloomer and Jennifer Flood here to give an update on the efforts that you're taking in Marana. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Paula Bloomer, and I just really am amazed at the stuff that's going on in the city and the county. The town has been working more off of an energy study that we had done a few years back, and we're working a lot with retrofitting our complexes, switching to solar where we can, changing our light fixtures to LED, that kind of thing. Jennifer, did you want to talk more about the study that was done? Nope, I guess not. So again, it's not a very large list, and it's not as aggressive as the city and the county, but we're trying to take little steps, and hopefully we can learn from what the other local jurisdictions are doing and build on that. So thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Well, that's what this forum is for, to learn from each other and collaborate as best we can. So we will move on now to the town of Oro Valley. I believe we have Hannah Oden here to give an update on your efforts. Go ahead, Hannah.
All right, thank you so much for the invitation. Looks like I have control of the screen. Yeah, again, like really great to hear about what the city of Tucson, Pima County, town of Marana are doing towards climate and resiliency. My presentation is going to be a little different than the city of Tucson and Pima County, just because we don't have a specific climate action plan, but I will give a brief update, kind of our climate and resiliency planning efforts right now. There we go. So this is just a quick overview of what I'll cover. I'm going to talk about the change in the town's growth and development patterns. Also want to touch on our environmentally sensitive lands ordinance, key zoning code and design standards related to climate and resiliency planning, and also alternative transportation planning. So I want to start just with an overview of our land development. So this map, hopefully you can all see it okay. It just kind of paints a picture of where we're at as a town. So essentially the town is 94% built out. There's only 6% of land that is vacant and developable. So kind of what you see on this map. So the green are open space areas. If there's no color, that's areas that are already developed. Blue, those are actually areas that are vacant, but they either have an approved plat or a development plan. So we do anticipate those to develop. And then yellow is really everything that doesn't have an approved development plan, and that's vacant, but would be open towards development. So as you can see, again, 94% built out. We just really don't have room to grow outwards, kind of like how we used to as a town. So kind of keeping all of that in mind, things are changing for the town with how we grow and how we develop. So Oro Valley definitely has, a bit of a reputation for kind of being a sprawling suburb, essentially. But we are moving away from that. Again, for, a lot of the reasons talked about in the previous slide. So what, we're seeing more, applications for infill development and redevelopment opportunities, more applications for increase in density and mixed use developments as well. So there really is a shift from, these kind of more sprawling type of, residential developments towards smart infill, more sustainable design, more or less suburban and a little more urban, at least urban for Oro Valley. And just again, a shift in how we're growing. So obviously with an increase in density, that's provides a more efficient use in resources, including water, energy, and infrastructure. You don't have kind of this sprawling type of development that we used to see. So, it's a new phase towards smart growth, which is pretty exciting for us. Of course, mixed use developments lead towards, less driving. You have more opportunity for people to, walk to get what they might need to run errands. So less, so pushing towards, maybe replacing vehicle trips towards, walking or biking. And just real quick, so the bottom image here, this is actually taken from a proposed redevelopment right now at the Oro Valley Marketplace. So that's pretty much directly across from Catalina State Park at the southwest of the Tangerine and Oracle Road intersection. So that's a pretty ambitious redevelopment project right now. It hasn't been approved by council as of now, but that calls for, or what they're proposing is for multiple apartment buildings, hotels, and more commercial areas in the marketplace. So again, that's a pretty exciting kind of, infill, increase in density, mixed use development opportunity. So again, that's kind of more of what we're going to be seeing as a town. All right, and so now I want to touch on the environmentally sensitive lands ordinance. So this has been around for about 10 years now. It was adopted in 2011 by town council, and it's actually based on the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan mapping. So essentially these, the ESLO, it's multiple categories for preserving either riparian areas and other environmentally sensitive lands in the town. And depending on the category, that determines how, what percentage of land has to be open space. So generally this applies to, when a developer, property owner is asking for a change in entitlements, which is usually rezonings. So kind of the key takeaway here, so we ran the numbers, and using ESL, subdivisions or developments can serve 324 more acres of open space than they would have if they weren't subject to ESL. So that was pretty neat to see just how, kind of how that's working. So essentially, this leads to more compact development, which is great because you're able to preserve more open space, protect native vegetation, promote, infill of our aquifers by reducing the amount of impermeable surfaces. Developers are also able to opt in to ESL, even if they're not necessarily subject to it. And we do have specific incentives for that. So again, this just really pushes more compact development versus sprawling over a larger site. So moving on to some key zoning and development standards, we do have a pretty robust rainwater harvesting requirements. A rainwater harvesting plan is required with any new development. So there's a calculation there, and we need to see how water is being harvested on site. Landscaped areas, there's also a requirement for those to be depressed. So that includes like buffer yards or just other landscape common areas in development. So that, of course, promotes rainwater harvesting and reduces dependence on irrigation. We also recently updated our parking code, which helps promote rainwater harvesting in parking lots. So we actually looked at the target on Oracle, kind of as an example. They've done a really great job there of rainwater harvesting in their parking lot. So we're encouraging that through the new parking code. We also have a pretty strict irrigation requirements for our buffer yards. So All buffer yards are required to have low water use plants. So these are landscaped areas around the perimeter of developments. And irrigation is required to be turned off after 5 years. So after that 5-year mark, those plants need to be reliant on the rainwater that comes naturally rather than relying on irrigation. We also have an approved native plant list as part of our zoning code. And so all landscape plants are subject to that. So that requires low water use plants for all developments. We also have an approved hydroseed mix. I think Oro Valley might be unique in this, but I'm not 100% sure. So we basically have a recipe for those hydroseed mixes using low water use plants. And we also have a prohibited plant list. So this includes invasive species and noxious weeds. Buffalo grass is definitely on there. So, with climate change, we're going to see, we're going to have a hotter, drier climate. There's going to be more of a risk for fire danger. So, property owners, basically, if these invasive species are on their property, they have to remove them. So, removing buffalo grass obviously decreases the amount of fire danger quite significantly. And, just overall, capturing that rainwater and reducing the need for, additional irrigation. All right, and lastly, I just want to touch on kind of the alternative transportation planning and where we're at with that. So we have a pretty extensive bike network in Oro Valley. Bike lanes are required with any new roadway, and so that helps promote alternative transportation, maybe reduce the amount of times that people need to get in their car to go somewhere. We also have a pretty impressive multi-use path expansion. Right now we have approximately 27 miles that are currently built. I'm not sure exactly how many are planned, but definitely, with any new roadway, we're looking at expanding that multi-use path system. Also, we're looking with any new development, we look at trail connectivity. So we have a pretty good trail system within the town that actually goes by a lot of residential developments. So when any new development proposal comes in, we're looking at how we can make those connections. And a lot of times those trails connect to sidewalks or the multi-use path. So essentially, we're really looking at making a connected network where, hopefully people won't need to get in their car to go somewhere. And maybe they can get there by walking or biking, and of course, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. All right, and that wraps everything up. I'll be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thanks, Anna. It's like you all are doing a lot of great work out in Oro Valley. Does anybody have any questions, Christina?
Hi, Hannah. It's been a while.
It has. Hi.
Congratulations on everything, and especially this. This is exciting. We're really happy you're up in Oro Valley now and doing good work. I'm very interested in the fact that you require some of these elements like rainwater harvesting in all new development, as opposed to just commercial or a certain cap on multifamily, et cetera. How's that been received by the community at large and the development community?
Yeah, I would say it's been received well. With every new plan, we essentially get a rainwater harvesting plan with it that shows, where their detention basins are, how their landscaped areas are graded, so we can see where everything's going. But yeah, overall, we always get a rainwater harvesting plan with those developments.
And have you had any problems with implementation in terms of having the plan be, absolutely fine and well accepted, and then having the actual construction and implementation be less than ideal, not depressed, not necessarily functioning as it was intended?
Yeah, absolutely. We have our inspector go out there and, sometimes
we're working through that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes it's not always to plan, and then, we'll have to ask them to, make the changes, but, first pass, it's not always perfect.
Well, thanks, Hannah. I appreciate your time, and I'm really excited that you're working with Oro Valley. It's good to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you too. Thanks.
Me, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you. That was a great presentation, and I likewise am interested in the water elements and excited to see that you mentioned those. So I know water is a really big topic when it comes to preparing for our climate future, and there's big planning going around that. But I'm wondering, since you brought up development, are there any policies you're considering that the town is considering related to infill and waters? So for example, like in the East Valley of Phoenix metro area, there are places where any new use of water that's being developed within town boundaries has to either bring in more water or offset the use elsewhere. So it's just an idea I'd throw out there, probably relevant for all of these speakers today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's really interesting. I'm not aware of anything to that effect yet, but definitely something to consider in the future that's really important.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Hannah. I appreciate you presenting on what you're doing. I'm not sure if Town of Sahuarita is here. I don't see Heidi Lasham on. If anybody else is representing the Town of Sahuarita, please speak up now. Okay. All right, well, that is all we had for today. So I think we can wrap up the meeting now. We don't have a finalized date for the, did you have another thing you wanted to
Sorry,
say?
I was just trying to lower my hand.
Okay, okay. May likely will be our next meeting, but it's not set yet, but we will definitely let you know. And I would just like to invite everybody, if you have any topics that you would like to learn more about or collaborate on through this forum, please reach out to Lee Comrie and let her know so we can work towards getting those on future agendas. And if we don't have anything else, then I would move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All right. Thank you all so much. We'll see you next time.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.